The beautiful Apache woman fell off her horse and broke her leg. Only a lonely farmer helped her. The late summer sun hung high above the wide Arizona land, spreading a warm golden color over the open plains. The wind moved gently through the tall grass, making it sway like soft waves on a calm lake. Birds circled lazily in the distance, and the sky stretched endlessly above, bright and open. It was the kind of day when the world felt large but peaceful, and everything moved at its own slow rhythm. Nayeli, a young Apache woman, rode across this beautiful land with the confidence of someone who knew every turn of it. From childhood, she had traveled these paths on horseback. She knew where the ground became rocky, where the sand grew soft, and where the small streams cut across the earth. Her dark braid moved behind her as she rode, and her eyes stayed focused on the way ahead. She had been told since she was little that she was a gifted rider, someone who felt at home on a horse the same way others felt safe in their homes. She believed that to be true, and her calm smile while she rode was proof of that. Today she was returning from visiting a nearby valley, where she had gone to check on plants her people used for medicine. She enjoyed these small journeys because they allowed her to spend time alone with her thoughts while she crossed land that felt like an old friend. She guided her horse with light movements, barely needing the reins. The horse trusted her completely and matched her steady pace. Every now and then she leaned forward and patted the horse's neck, whispering gentle words. She liked talking to her horse. It made her feel less alone out in the open world. The horse flicked its ears in response, as if listening carefully. As she rode, she admired the land around her. The earth stretched far in every direction, a mix of red, brown, and gold. Small bushes dotted the ground, and the distant mountains looked hazy under the sun. Even though she had seen this landscape many times before, it never looked the same. Sometimes the light changed it. Sometimes the weather did. Today it looked warm and endless, like a painting full of life. Nayeli felt relaxed, almost dreamy, letting the gentle rhythm of the horse carry her forward. She was not rushing. Her village was still hours away, but she enjoyed the quietness of her ride. The warm wind brushed against her face, and the air smelled of dry grass and sun-heated earth. For her, this was freedom. But the land, despite its beauty, also carried surprises. Even a skilled rider like Nayeli had to stay aware. The plains could shift quickly. A small hole hidden by grass, a sudden sound, or an animal crossing the path could change things in a heartbeat. As she guided her horse along a familiar stretch of open ground, the animal lifted its head suddenly. Its ears pointed forward, then sideways. Nayeli felt the tiny shift before she even saw anything. She gently tugged the reins, trying to calm the horse. She had learned long ago that horses sense things humans might not notice right away. Sometimes it was a distant noise, sometimes a shadow, sometimes nothing more than a scent in the air. "Easy," she whispered softly. Her horse slowed but kept moving. Nayeli glanced around, scanning the ground. She saw nothing unusual, just rocks, sunlit grass, and stretches of open land. She loosened her grip slightly, thinking the moment had passed. The horse walked on, calm again. But only a few breaths later, the ground ahead shifted with quick movement. Her horse reacted instantly. Something had startled it, something sudden enough to break its calm. Nayeli didn't see what it was, only that the horse stopped so fast that her body jerked forward. She grabbed the reins tighter, steadying herself. She tried to soothe the horse again, but before she could do anything, the horse suddenly stepped sideways. Its muscles tensed beneath her. Nayeli's heart jumped, and she tried to stay balanced. She wasn't frightened, but she knew the horse needed reassurance. She patted its neck and spoke softly, urging it to relax. But the horse took another sharp step. The movement came too quickly for her to adjust. She leaned forward to hold on, but her weight shifted the wrong way, and the horse moved again at the same moment. In the blink of an eye, her balance slipped completely. She felt the world tilt, and suddenly she was falling. She reached out instinctively, but there was nothing to grab. She hit the ground harder than she expected. Her leg twisted beneath her, and she felt a sharp, sudden pain shoot through it. The breath rushed out of her lungs, leaving her stunned. For a moment she lay there, eyes closed, waiting for the shock to settle. The sun felt hotter now, pressing against her skin. She slowly tried to sit up, but the pain in her leg stopped her halfway. She breathed through it, hoping it would fade, but it stayed strong and sharp. Her horse stood a short distance away now, kicking the ground nervously. It wasn't running away, just frightened and unsure. Nayeli raised a hand toward it, whispering gently. The horse hesitated, then took a few steps back, still restless. She tried again to move her leg, but the pain made her gasp softly. She understood what had happened. The fall had left her injured, and she could not stand. She tried not to panic, but she felt a cold worry settle in her chest. The land around her was quiet again, but this time the quiet felt heavy. The sun continued its slow climb, and the shadows on the ground shifted. She looked around, searching for any sign of help, but there was nothing. No people, no nearby shelter, no riders traveling the same path. She called out softly, not because she expected an answer, but because the sound kept her from feeling completely alone. The wind carried her voice away almost instantly. She rested her head against the warm ground, breathing slowly. The open plains that had always felt friendly now seemed endless. She tried to think clearly. She had been trained all her life to face challenges calmly. She knew she needed to stay aware and preserve her strength. Her horse watched her from a distance, confused and unsure. She hoped it would not wander off. She knew she depended on it more than ever now. Minutes passed, though they felt longer. The sun moved inch by inch, and the world around her stayed still. She tried shifting a little to ease the discomfort, but every movement brought another wave of pain. She closed her eyes again, steadying her breath. She pictured her village, her family, her people, the warm fires, the evening songs. She wished she were there instead of lying alone on the dry earth with an injured leg. She wondered how long it would take for someone to pass by. This area was not always traveled at this time of day. Some days no one came at all. She didn't want fear to take root, so she focused on the sounds around her, the wind, the distant call of a bird, the soft stamping of her horse's hooves. She reminded herself that she had survived many difficult moments before. She only needed one person to pass by, one person who would stop. Yet the plains remained empty. The longer she stayed, the more she felt the weight of her situation. She was far from her village. Walking was impossible. The horse was too unsettled for her to reach it, and the day was growing hotter. Still, she kept her hope steady. Hope was something her people taught her to hold on to, especially in quiet moments like this. She whispered to herself, reminding her heart to stay calm. She would not be alone forever. Someone would come. She had no way of knowing that, not too far away, a lonely farmer was working his land, unaware that his quiet day was about to change in a way he never expected. Eli Turner lived a quiet life on the edge of the open plains, in a small wooden cabin that sat alone beside a patch of farmland. Most days were the same for him. He woke up early long before the sun rose, made himself a simple breakfast, tended to his animals, and walked the rows of crops he planted months earlier. The fields were not big, but they required patience and daily care. Eli had learned long ago that plants grew best when someone paid attention to them every single day. On this warm afternoon, the sun glowed bright over his fields as he worked slowly with his hands in the soil. Sweat gathered beneath his hat, and dust clung to his boots. But he didn't mind. Work gave him something to do, something steady and quiet. He preferred it over the noise of busy towns or crowded gatherings. Solitude felt like a familiar friend to him. After everything he had lost through the years, silence had become the safest place for his heart. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and straightened his back, feeling a small ache he had grown used to. Years of work had shaped his body, strong arms, a tired posture, and a quiet determination in his movements. He took a deep breath and looked over the land. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. Every fence post, every wooden beam in his cabin, every plant in the soil had been placed there by his own hands. There was comfort in that. The breeze came lightly across the field, carrying a soft sound no louder than a whisper. Eli paused. The sound was faint, too faint for him to understand. He stood still and listened more carefully, focusing his ears the way someone does when they're waiting for something important. The fields were usually quiet except for the wind and the soft rustling of leaves. But this sound felt different, thin, distant, almost like a voice carried by the air. He looked around but saw nothing unusual. Only the golden grass waving gently and the bright sky stretching far beyond the horizon. Maybe it was nothing, he told himself. Maybe the wind was simply playing tricks on him. He turned back to his work and dug his fingers once more into the soil. But then he heard it again, this time clearer though still soft. A call, a human sound. Eli let the soil fall from his hand and stood up straight again. He wiped his palms on his pants and listened harder. The second sound came faintly, almost as if someone far away was calling out without much strength. He felt his heart pick up speed. Out on this land, voices didn't just appear. This area was far from the busy roads. Travelers rarely passed through. People from nearby communities stayed on known paths. Anyone calling out from the plains must be in need of help. He felt a mix of caution and curiosity. He lived alone for a reason. He kept to himself. Life had taught him to move carefully, to observe before stepping toward anything unknown. But life had also taught him something else. If someone needed help, ignoring them wasn't something he could ever bring himself to do. He reached for his hat, placed it firmly on his head, and started walking toward the direction the sound seemed to come from. The tall grass brushed against his legs as he moved. At first, he walked slowly, unsure whether he was imagining things. But when he paused again, he heard the faint cry one more time. This time it was unmistakable. Someone was out there. He quickened his pace, though still staying alert. His boots moved over uneven ground as he followed the sound across the open land. Every few steps he paused to listen again. The plains seemed peaceful, but something about the wind carried a sense of urgency he couldn't ignore. He walked farther than he expected. The cabin grew smaller behind him. The fields disappeared from view. Now it was only him and the vast land stretching ahead. The voice was clearer but weak, as if it belonged to someone who had been calling for a long time without success. As he climbed a gentle rise in the land, he felt a sudden image flash in his mind, memories of years long gone. Times when he wasn't alone. Times when his home had been filled with laughter and conversation. Times when he had woken up not to silence but to warm company. The ache of those memories pressed against him for a moment. He let out a slow breath and pushed the thoughts aside. This was not the time to drift into old sorrows. Someone out there needed him now in the present moment. When he reached the top of the rise, he scanned the land below. At first, he saw nothing but tall grass and scattered rocks. The plains looked empty, the sun made everything shimmer in the distance. But then, a small shape caught his eye. Something lying low near the ground, still but not fully hidden. He narrowed his eyes. It wasn't an animal, it wasn't a piece of fallen wood, it looked like a person. Eli's heartbeat quickened. He hurried down the slope, moving as quickly as the ground allowed. When he reached the figure, he finally saw her clearly. A young woman, dressed in Apache clothing, lying on the dry earth with one leg stretched awkwardly. Her eyes opened slowly when she heard footsteps approaching. She looked tired, exhausted even, but conscious. His shadow fell over her as he came closer, and for a moment they simply stared at each other, both surprised. Eli knelt down beside her, keeping his movements calm so she wouldn't feel threatened or afraid. He could see the discomfort written across her face, but she did not cry out. She was trying to stay strong despite the pain. He spoke softly, trying to reassure her. His voice came out gentle, careful, almost hesitant. "I'm here to help," he said. She said nothing at first, but her breathing softened, and her eyes showed a mix of relief and uncertainty. She seemed unsure whether she could trust him. He didn't blame her. Their worlds were different. Their communities didn't interact often, and misunderstandings were common. But Eli didn't see her the way others might. All he saw was a person who needed help. He glanced at her injured leg. Even without touching it, he could tell it was not in good condition. She must have been lying there for a long time. He wondered how long she had been calling for help, hoping someone would come by. He asked her gently, "Can you move at all?" She shook her head slightly, and the motion seemed to cost her strength. He knew she needed rest and care. She needed water, shade, and a safe place. Leaving her here was not an option. "I'll carry you," he said softly, making sure she could see the sincerity in his eyes. The woman watched him closely, her eyes searching his face for any sign of harm or deception. But she found none. Eli had a quiet honesty about him, something calm and steady. Eventually, she gave a small nod, letting him know she would trust him. Carefully, he slid one arm behind her back and the other beneath her legs. She winced softly when he lifted her, but she did not protest. He held her securely, making sure not to disturb her injured leg more than necessary. Her weight was light, but the responsibility he felt was heavy. He took slow, steady steps, adjusting his grip to keep her comfortable. The open land stretched ahead, and his cabin was far behind him, but he did not worry about the distance. All that mattered now was getting her to safety. As he walked, he felt her relax slightly against him, as if she understood she was now in the care of someone who meant her no harm. The breeze brushed against them, carrying the scent of warm grass and the soft promise of shelter waiting ahead. They stayed quiet as he carried her across the land. He didn't ask questions. She didn't explain what had happened. There would be time for that later. All that mattered now was moving forward, step by careful step, toward the cabin that stood like a small refuge in the endless plains. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows that followed them across the earth. The day was slowly turning toward evening, bringing cooler air and softer light. Eli felt grateful for that. It would make the journey easier on her. Every few minutes he glanced at her to see how she was doing. Her eyes sometimes closed, but she wasn't asleep, just resting, gathering strength, trusting him a little more with each passing moment. He felt responsible for her in a way he hadn't felt responsible for anyone in a long time. When the cabin finally came into view, standing quietly beside the fields he knew so well, he felt a quiet sense of relief. Almost there, he thought to himself. He kept walking until the small porch was only a few steps away. The wooden boards creaked softly under his boots as he stepped onto them. He opened the door with his shoulder, careful not to jostle her, and carried her inside. The coolness of the cabin greeted them, dim but comforting. He made sure the space was clean and safe as he gently laid her down on a small bed he rarely used. He stepped back only a little, giving her room to breathe, but stayed close enough to let her know she wasn't alone. Her tired eyes opened again, meeting his. He gave her a calm, reassuring nod. "You're safe now," he said quietly. And for the first time since her fall, she believed it. The quiet inside the cabin felt gentle, almost like a blanket placed over the noise of the outside world. Naomi lay on the small bed while Eli moved around the room, gathering what he needed. She watched him with careful eyes, still unsure of him but slowly relaxing in his presence. There was something calm about the way he moved, slow, deliberate, thoughtful, as if he didn't want to disturb the peace in the room. Eli opened a wooden cabinet and pulled out a folded cloth, a small bowl, and a jug of water. His hands were slightly rough from years of work, but his touch remained gentle as he placed everything on the table beside her. He avoided sudden movements, knowing she was already frightened enough just from being in a stranger's home. He turned to her with a soft expression. "I'm going to clean your leg and make it comfortable," he said. His voice carried the same steady warmth as before. Naomi nodded faintly. She didn't speak his language fluently, but she understood enough. Her people sometimes traded with settlers, so she recognized some words. His tone, more than anything, told her what she needed to know. He meant no harm. Eli knelt beside the bed and began inspecting her injured leg with the most delicate care. He didn't touch it right away. Instead, he watched her face first, checking if she seemed uncomfortable. When she didn't pull away, he took a warm cloth and slowly cleaned the dust and dirt around the swollen area. She winced slightly. He immediately paused. "Sorry," he whispered. She shook her head. "Okay," she managed to say softly. Her voice was weak, but hearing her speak made Eli feel relieved. It meant she trusted him enough to respond. He continued cleaning the area, using the warm cloth to ease the soreness. Then he reached for a few long pieces of fabric he kept for emergencies. They were simple but strong. He wrapped them gently around her leg to keep it from moving too much. As he worked, the room stayed quiet except for the soft sound of fabric and the slow rhythm of their breathing. Through the small window, the evening light entered the cabin, making the air look golden and peaceful. Naomi's eyes followed Eli's movements. His face showed calm focus, like he had done this many times even though his life didn't seem to involve much company. His brow furrowed slightly as he wrapped her leg, and his lips pressed together in concentration. She wasn't used to seeing settlers up close for so long, but something about him felt different. He was gentle in a way that surprised her. When he finished, he sat back on his heels and looked at her leg one more time to make sure everything was in place. "This should help," he said quietly. She nodded, feeling some of the tension in her body ease. The pain was still there, but now it felt more bearable, as if she no longer had to face it alone. Eli stood up and poured water into a cup, handing it to her. Her fingers trembled slightly as she took it, but she held the cup firmly enough to sip from it. The cool water refreshed her dry throat, and she closed her eyes briefly in relief. He watched her, making sure she could drink without trouble. Only when she finished did he sit down on a wooden chair a short distance away, giving her space. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other without speaking. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, just one filled with curiosity and a quiet understanding neither of them needed to explain. Eli was the first to break the silence. "How long were you out there?" Naomi hesitated. She understood some of the question, not all of it, but she guessed what he meant. She lifted her hand and held up two fingers, then pointed to the sky as if showing the sun's path. "Two, son," she said softly. "2 days." Eli's eyes widened slightly. He looked at her with a mix of worry and admiration. 2 days out on the plains with an injured leg and no shelter. He couldn't imagine how hard that must have been. She must have been calling out for help, hoping someone would pass by. He was grateful he had heard her, even if the thought of how long she had lain there left a tight feeling in his chest. "You're strong," he said gently. She didn't know the exact meaning of the word, but she understood the emotion behind it. A small, faint smile touched her lips. Eli stood again and lit a small lantern. The sky outside was turning orange, moving slowly toward dusk. The temperature inside the cabin shifted to a cooler, more comfortable warmth. He placed the lantern near the center of the room to give them better light. Naomi shifted slightly on the bed, trying to get comfortable. Her leg hurt, but the bandages helped keep it still. She watched Eli move around the cabin, preparing something for her to eat. He wasn't much of a cook, but he could make simple meals that were enough to keep a person nourished. He filled a pot with water and placed it on the small stove. Then he added dried herbs and bits of vegetables he had saved from his garden. The sound of boiling water created a soothing rhythm in the small room. Naomi breathed in the warm aroma that soon filled the cabin. It reminded her of home, not the exact smell, but the comforting feeling of someone preparing food nearby. She felt her eyes grow a little heavy, the exhaustion finally settling into her now that she was safe. Eli noticed and spoke softly. "You should rest." She shook her head faintly, not wanting to fall asleep so soon. Being in a stranger's home made her cautious, even if she felt safe with him. She wanted to stay awake long enough to understand more of her surroundings. Eli understood her hesitation without needing words. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're safe here." Something in the way he said the word safe made her believe it. She relaxed into the bed little by little, letting the warmth of the room wrap around her. When the food was ready, Eli placed a bowl on a tray and brought it to her. He didn't fill it too much, knowing she might not have the strength to eat much yet. She accepted the bowl with a quiet nod. The simple soup tasted comforting and warm. Each small spoonful helped restore her strength. Eli didn't eat yet. He sat nearby, watching to make sure she could manage on her own. The soft light from the lantern made the room feel warm and gentle, like it was holding them both in a pocket of calm. After a few minutes, she lowered the spoon and looked at him, her expression grateful. She placed a hand lightly against her chest, a gesture she had seen people use in moments of appreciation. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. Eli nodded, touched by her gratitude. "You're welcome," he replied. As she rested, he began tidying the room quietly, not wanting to disturb her. Every so often he glanced her way, checking if she seemed uncomfortable or in need of anything. She lay on the bed with her eyes half closed, watching him with a soft expression. His presence felt steady, like the calm rhythm of the earth. The evening deepened outside, and the first stars appeared in the sky. The cabin grew quieter and softer, the peaceful night wrapped around them like a gentle blanket. Yet under that calm, something new lingered in the room, something Eli felt but didn't fully understand. A sense of responsibility, yes, but also something more unexpected. It was the feeling of connection. It had been so long since he had shared space with another person in such a close, human way. He wasn't sure what to call the feeling, but he knew it was warm, gentle, and unfamiliar. Naomi felt something similar. She was far from home, injured, and surrounded by a world different from her own, yet she didn't feel alone. Something about this quiet farmer made her feel grounded, as if she were still connected to the earth she trusted so deeply. They were two people from very different worlds, sitting in a tiny cabin in the middle of a vast, quiet land. Neither had planned this meeting. Neither fully understood what it meant. But both knew, deep in their hearts, that this moment, this quiet beginning, was the start of something important, something unexpected, something neither of them could have imagined only hours earlier. Days passed in a slow and gentle rhythm inside the small cabin. Every morning, the sun rose over the plains, filling the sky with soft colors of gold and apricot. The light entered the cabin quietly, brushing the wooden floor and warming the air. Eli always woke early, stepping softly so he wouldn't disturb Nayeli, who rested on the small bed near the window. She often woke later, her legs still healing but far more stable now thanks to Eli's careful attention. Each day, the routine became familiar. Eli tended to the animals, checked the crops, collected water, and returned to the cabin to prepare simple meals. Nayeli watched him with growing curiosity. His movements were always calm and deliberate, never rushed, never careless. He worked with a deep patience that showed he had learned to live life slowly, without expecting too much from it. Every time he walked back inside the cabin after working outside, he would look at her first. Even if he had only been gone a short while, he made sure she was comfortable. She noticed that about him, how he always checked on her before anything else. It was a quiet habit, but it told her more about his heart than any words could. Nayeli tried to help when she could, though her injured leg limited her. Sometimes she folded pieces of cloth for him, or sorted herbs, or simply kept the room tidy. But Eli never asked her to do more than she could. He always urged her to rest, to let her leg heal fully before trying to be useful. Her recovery was slow, but every day she felt a little stronger. Eli refreshed the bandages regularly, always using gentle hands. He made her simple soups, soft breads, and warm tea with herbs he grew himself. Though the food was plain, she appreciated each meal because it carried his effort and care. But beyond the daily tasks, something else grew between them, something quiet and unexpected. It began with small conversations. At first, they spoke little. Their languages were not the same, and both struggled to understand each other fully, but the silence between them was calm, not uncomfortable. Gradually, they found simple words they both understood. Sometimes they sat by the window together, watching the sun sink behind the distant hills. Eli would point at something outside, a cloud, a bird, a shape in the land, and say a word. Nayeli would repeat it, learning his language slowly. Other times, she taught him words from her own language. They laughed softly when either of them mispronounced something. These quiet moments created a bridge between their worlds, one built from small smiles, gentle patience, and shared silence. In the evenings, when the sky darkened and cool air filled the cabin, they often sat near the small lantern on the table. Eli worked on fixing tools or carving wood, while Nayeli sorted herbs or simply rested. The lantern's soft glow made the room feel warm and safe, as if time slowed inside its circle of light. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't, but the comfort remained. One night, Nayeli asked about his life, not through many words, but through gesture and simple questions. Eli hesitated at first. He wasn't used to sharing his thoughts with anyone. For years, he had carried his memories alone, locked away in a part of him he rarely visited. But when she looked at him with quiet patience, waiting but not pushing, he felt something shift inside him. He spoke slowly, using words she could understand. He told her that he had not always lived alone. Once, he had shared his home with family and laughter, but over time, life had changed. People he loved had passed on, and he found himself in a world that grew quieter with each passing year. He didn't share details. He didn't need to. The sadness in his eyes spoke enough. Nayeli listened without interrupting. Her heart softened as she heard his story. She understood loss. Her people had faced many changes. She had lost loved ones too. She reached out and placed her hand gently over his. It was a simple gesture, but it held understanding deeper than words. Eli looked at her hand resting on his, and for a long moment neither of them moved. The warmth of her touch was comforting, grounding him more than he expected. He didn't pull away. Instead, he let the moment settle quietly between them. From that night on, something felt different. Their connection, once only a gentle thread, grew stronger. They moved around each other with natural ease. They understood each other's moods without needing explanations. The cabin no longer felt like a place of solitude. It felt like a shared home, even if only temporarily. But their peaceful days existed under a quiet tension neither of them had spoken about. Nayeli's tribe had likely started searching for her. She knew this. She had been gone too long. The Apache did not abandon their people, especially someone young like her. They would send scouts to find her trail, and if they followed it far enough, they would discover she had been taken in by a settler. Meanwhile, nearby settlers were always watchful. They noticed tracks. They paid attention to anything unusual. If they learned that an Apache woman was staying in a farmer's cabin, misunderstandings could easily arise. Fear often created problems where none were meant to exist. Both worlds had tensions, unspoken but always near the surface. Eli understood this too. He didn't talk about it openly, but he felt the quiet weight of it each time he looked out at the horizon. One afternoon, he returned from checking the fields with a thoughtful expression. Naomi noticed instantly. His eyes drifted toward the plains more often. His shoulders were slightly tense. When she asked gently, he only shook his head at first. Later, as the sun began to set, he finally explained in simple words so she could understand. He had seen tracks near his land. Boot tracks, more than one set, fresh. Settlers sometimes passed by, but they rarely walked this close to his cabin unless they were searching for something or simply curious. Naomi listened quietly. She understood the unspoken meaning. Settlers didn't often welcome her people. They didn't always understand the Apache way of life, and misunderstandings could happen easily. Neither she nor Eli wanted trouble. Eli added more softly, "Also, I think your people, they may be near." He gestured toward the distant hills. "Tracks, light ones, careful ones." "They watch." Naomi's heart tightened. She knew what that meant. The Apache scouts had likely found signs of her path. They would be searching carefully, trying to understand what had happened to her. The fact that they were close filled her with a mix of relief and worry. She was glad her people hadn't given up on her, but she also knew how this situation must look from their perspective. She was staying in a settler's cabin, injured and vulnerable. They wouldn't know Eli had helped her. They might worry. They might misunderstand. She looked at Eli with concern in her eyes. She pointed gently to herself, then to the door, then to the wide land outside. The gesture was simple but clear. She didn't want him to face trouble because of her presence. Eli shook his head firmly. His expression softened, but there was a quiet determination behind his eyes. He pointed to her leg, then to her resting place, then to his own chest. He didn't want her to leave until she was healed. He couldn't let her wander into the plains on a weak leg just to avoid tension. Her safety mattered to him more than the risk. Naomi's eyes softened. She felt warmth spread through her chest, an emotion gentle but deep. As the week continued, signs of people nearby grew more noticeable. Sometimes Eli found slight marks in the soil, footprints too light to belong to settlers. Sometimes Naomi felt a familiar presence in the wind, a sense she had learned to trust since childhood. Her people were close, watching from a distance. Despite this, the atmosphere inside the cabin stayed calm. Eli and Naomi continued their quiet routine. They shared meals, exchanged simple words, and watched the sky change color each morning and evening. Their connection strengthened not through dramatic moments, but through the everyday kindnesses they offered each other. But both knew a moment of change was coming. One evening, as twilight settled softly around the cabin, Naomi watched Eli light the lantern. The warm glow illuminated his face, showing the gentleness she had grown so accustomed to. She knew her people would soon reach the cabin, and when they did, she would have to leave. The thought made her heart feel heavy, not out of fear, but out of something deeper. She didn't want the quiet bond between them to end. She didn't want the safety of this place to fade into a memory. Eli looked at her, his expression soft yet filled with unspoken understanding. He knew too. He could feel the approaching separation as clearly as she could. Neither of them spoke about it aloud, but the silence in the cabin that night carried more weight than usual. It was the kind of silence that held emotions gently, like a soft hand placed over a fragile memory. They both knew their peaceful days were coming to an end. But they also knew something important. The time they had shared, quiet, gentle, unexpected, had changed them both. In the dim light, as the lantern flickered softly, they stayed close, letting the warmth of the room hold them together a little longer before the world outside called them back to their separate paths. The morning came quietly, softer than usual, as if the earth itself knew. Something important was about to happen. A gentle fog drifted across the plains, settling lightly around the cabin. The sky carried a pale, early light, and everything outside looked calm, almost dreamy. Inside the cabin, the air was warm, touched by the soft glow of the small fire Eli had started before dawn. Naomi sat on the bed, her back resting against the wall. Her leg was much stronger now. The swelling had gone down, and she could move it more comfortably. She still needed care, but the worst had passed. Her strength had returned day by day, helped by Eli's patience and the safety of the little cabin. She breathed in deeply, feeling both comfort and something like sadness as she looked around the room she had come to know so well. Eli stood near the window, looking out over the land with thoughtful eyes. His hands rested lightly on the windowsill and the morning light brushed across his face. He could feel something in the air, something quiet yet certain. For days he had sensed the presence of others nearby. The light tracks on the earth, the faint hints of movement at the edge of his land, the feeling of being watched not with danger but with concern. Today, the feeling was stronger than ever. When he turned toward Naeli, their eyes met and neither needed to speak. They both understood. Her people were close, very close. She shifted slightly on the bed and lowered her gaze. Her heart felt heavy, not from worry, but from the realization that she would soon leave the cabin that had become a place of peace for her. She placed her hand gently over her leg, feeling how much it had healed. Many days ago, she had feared being left alone on the plains. She had felt helpless and far from home, but that moment of fear had led her to a quiet farmer whose kindness had changed everything. Eli walked toward her slowly and sat on the chair beside the bed. For a moment, he didn't speak. He simply watched her, his expression soft and full of unspoken understanding. "You're almost healed," he said gently, choosing his words carefully so she could follow them. She nodded. "Yes." He sighed softly and looked down at his hands, clasped loosely together. "They will come soon," he said, not with fear but with acceptance. "Your people, they are near." Naeli looked out the window, a soft sadness in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of seeing her people again. She longed for them, for the voices she knew, for the familiar comfort of her village. But leaving this cabin meant leaving someone who had become unexpectedly important to her. Someone who had shown her care without expecting anything in return. Someone whose quiet presence had become a steady part of her days. She looked back at Eli and spoke softly, her words slow but sincere. "You helped me, very much. My people, they will be thankful." He smiled, but there was a quiet sadness behind it, though he didn't try to hide it. "I'm glad I could help," he said simply. "I couldn't have left you out there." She reached out carefully and placed her hand over his. For a long moment, neither moved. The touch was gentle, warm, full of gratitude and something deeper that neither of them wanted to speak aloud. Words didn't matter. The feeling between them rested in the quiet space they shared. Outside, the soft crunch of footsteps touched the ground, light, controlled, familiar to Naeli. She sat up straighter. Eli heard it too. He wasn't startled. He simply stood and walked to the door, opening it slowly. The warm morning air drifted in. At first, the land looked empty. Then, like soft shapes blending into the fog, figures appeared at a distance. They approached quietly, respectfully, their steps careful, Apache scouts. Their posture was calm, not threatening. They had been searching for Naeli for days, maybe weeks. Now they had finally found her. Naeli took a slow breath, steadying herself. She pushed herself up carefully, testing her leg. It held her weight. Not perfectly, but strongly enough. Eli stepped beside her, offering his arm. She accepted his support not because she needed it fully, but because the gesture itself felt meaningful. When they stepped outside together, the cool air touched their faces. The scouts paused a few yards away, surprised but relieved to see her alive. Their eyes shifted briefly to Eli, cautious yet curious. Naeli stepped forward slowly, keeping her movements calm and open. She spoke to them in her language, her words quiet but steady. She told them she was safe. She told them she had been cared for. She told them the farmer had helped her when she needed it most. The scouts listened. Their expressions softened. One of them approached her gently, checking her leg with respectful concern. Then he nodded to Eli, a small gesture of acknowledgement, a silent thank you. Eli nodded back. He didn't speak, but respect passed between him and the scouts like a calm breeze. Naeli turned back to Eli. The moment felt too big for simple words, yet words were all they had. She looked at him with a gentle, heavy emotion in her eyes. "I go," she said quietly, "but I do not forget." He swallowed softly, feeling the words settle deeply inside him. "Nor will I," he replied in a low voice. A quiet stillness fell between them. The morning light glowed around them, and for a moment it felt like the world had slowed down just for them, giving them time to say goodbye without hurry. Naeli reached into the small pouch she had kept with her, the only item she had from the day of her fall. She took out a small beaded charm, simple but meaningful, something she had made long before her journey. She pressed it gently into Eli's hand. "For you," she said, "so you remember." He looked at the charm, then at her, his eyes filled with a warm sorrow. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion he didn't show often. The scouts waited patiently. They knew this moment mattered. Naeli took one last look at the cabin, the place that had sheltered her, the place where she had felt kindness, peace, and unexpected connection. Then she looked at Eli again. Their eyes held for a long, quiet moment, filled with gratitude, respect, and the soft ache of parting. Then slowly, she turned and walked toward her people with careful steps. They surrounded her gently, supporting her without crowding her. Together, they began walking away across the open plains, their figures blending into the early morning light. Eli stood at the doorway long after they disappeared from sight. The fog lifted slowly, and the plains returned to their bright golden color. The cabin felt empty without her presence, too quiet, too still. Yet at the same time, he felt a warmth inside him that he hadn't felt in years. He knew their paths had crossed for a reason. He knew her presence had changed him, just as he had helped her in her moment of need. Days passed. Life returned to its familiar rhythm, but something new lived in the air. The cabin no longer felt like a place for loneliness. It felt like a place touched by connection. One morning, Eli opened his door to find a small bundle left on the edge of his fence. Inside were soft animal hides, herbs tied neatly with string, and a simple wooden carving shaped like a running horse. Gifts from her people. He smiled quietly as he touched the carving. It was smooth, warm, carefully made, a message of gratitude. A message that he was remembered. And from that day on, small gifts appeared from time to time, always placed quietly at the edge of his land, never left with a note, but always meaningful. Each one reminded him of the beautiful Apache woman he had helped. Each one reminded him that kindness ripples beyond the moment it is given. And though their worlds were different, their paths had crossed in a way that neither time nor distance could erase. Their quiet bond remained alive in their memories, held gently like a warm light in the heart. A story that began with a fall on the open plains ended with gratitude, connection, and the quiet promise that kindness never truly fades, even when two people walk in different directions.